Hey everyone, welcome to Call Me Crazy. We're really excited today to welcome on Jeff Morrill. He is a serial entrepreneur, he's an expert on hiring, and we're going to talk about his book. He's the author of Profit Wise, which is a book on how to make money in business by doing the right thing. So, Jeff, welcome to the show.
Great. I'm glad to be with you. Thank you.
Yeah, we're super excited to have you on. I think it's kind of a interesting time for us. We're actually bringing on people to kind of onboard into Dope Dog, our company. And I know right before the podcast we were talking about, hiring and how important that was. And can you give everybody just a little bit of brief background on your history, and then we can kind of dive into some hiring information, because we need a lot of it.
Yeah, sure. I'm looking forward to it. So I graduated from college and couldn't find a job, which is how I ended up in the service department of a car dealership. And it turns out that you have to be really careful about that first job you take out of school, because here I am many years later and I'm still connected to that same line of employment. But my brother and I, for some years while we were working for other people, discussed the idea of owning our own business. So we started looking, and it took us a while, but we found a bankrupt Subaru dealership in just outside of Boston, Massachusetts. So we moved up from Virginia. That was our first business. That was in 1998. And we've opened some others too, organically, really. I can't say that we went out looking so hard to find them, but sometimes when you're in business, they kind of come your way. Opportunities roll down like bowling balls, and sometimes they hit the pins. And so some of those things worked out for us. And I guess just to conclude that very introductory biography, I think if you look at why I've been blessed with the many things that have found me, I'd say the first is a lot of luck, and the second is a gentle persistence. And I encourage people that are interested in business or starting a business just to keep on doing the things that they need to do to keep getting closer to finding their dreams.
And how did you involve kind of the ethical side of business? Because a few weeks ago, we spoke to somebody that actually I had no idea there was a B Corp that you could actually register for and have that a core part of your business. How did that kind of become part of your kind of vision for being an entrepreneur?
I guess we were raised in a family where we were encouraged to think about the consequences of our actions on other people, and to try to do something for our little corner of the world. And there are a lot of ways you can do that. In fact, I originally, as I said before, I accidentally ended up in the car business. My hope growing up, I thought I was going to do something in politics, because I thought that was a nice way to in government has the authority and the ability and the budget to really change society in positive ways when it works well. So that was my original interest. And what I discovered later, I can't say that this was some grand master plan, but you can improve your corner of the world basically no matter what you're doing. And businesses, because of the volume of dollars that flow through them, you have a lot of opportunities to direct those dollars in ways that are pro-social. So I'll give you an example. I mean, we're effectively a sales organization. We sell all sorts of things. We sell vehicles at the car dealerships. We sell insurance policies through our insurance business. We sell space on cell tower infrastructure. I mean, we sell a lot. But the other thing we do is we buy a lot. And the way we spend our money can really help the world. One of the things we buy, if you think about it sort of in a capitalistic terminology, is labor. And that's sort of an economics course way of thinking about the relationship that we have with the team members that actually do the work in our companies. And so the dollars that we spend there, we've tried to do that in a way that invites people that are traditionally not very well represented in our industries to join our companies. And that's a way of serving the communities that they come, because it strengthens them financially. It helps those individuals because they have a career path and they get skills that they wouldn't have otherwise had. And they earn a lot because we have industries that are just, there's a lot of revenue flowing through them. So they get a chunk of that revenue for themselves.
How has the ethical practices evolved since your very first business till now? Because I feel like it's something that sometimes is maybe an afterthought, or you don't think about it when you're first getting started out. And a lot of companies now are wanting to start on the right foot. So have you seen that evolve in your companies, and what maybe are you doing now that you didn't do before?
Sure. Well, the premise of my book, Profit Wise, is that the two can go together. In other words, there are occasions, like if you're writing checks to charities, that strengthens the charity when you write the check, but it actually weakens your company because you're taking money out of your company that you could have used for something else. But in the case of like our very unusual way of inviting traditionally unrepresented people into our company, we get access to a much deeper talent pool than our competitors do. And it serves those individuals and their families and their communities that are sending those people to serve with us in our companies. So they go together. To answer your question directly, though, I think at the beginning, we were just afraid of going out of business. Like so many early entrepreneurs, they're just tremendous expenses involved and not a lot of revenue, lots of long hours. You're so stressed out that you're not thinking especially clearly, which is probably the first 10 years of my business journey. So in those circumstances, I think maybe I was a little less focused than I've become. Now that the businesses are very well established and the revenue is more reliable and consistent than it was at the beginning, we're willing to roll the dice more. So we're willing to take on projects that we would have been afraid to do earlier in the life cycle of the company.
And with the hiring at this point, how has that been something that has kind of changed along your path and the things that you've kind of learned? Because for us, we're kind of going through it, hiring at a very small scale, but it's still tough because we're realizing how hard it is to get the right person or somebody that's excited about it or somebody that wants to, start here, but doesn't see that the end goal, you could actually become a bigger role in the company. And I try to explain that. I think it's hard to get across. Like, I want people excited about it. Cause I remember as an intern, I used to intern at a radio station. And then eventually I was on, a morning show at some point, and I knew that's like what I wanted. And I knew I could work hard to get there. And right now, maybe I'm not seeing it in people, or I don't know what it is, but how are you finding the right people to work for you?
Well, we learned a lot of things the hard way. And one of the things we learned is that I don't think we clearly understood at the beginning exactly who we were looking for. So now I'll give you just one example. Before we run a recruiting ad on an online, website,
like a ZipRecruiter or something?
People. Yeah, sure. We use Indeed a lot.
Okay.
And before we do that, we already have most of these built. But if we have a new position, we spend that little bit of time to figure out who is the person we're looking for. Like, can we describe this person and put it on paper? Because there's something about that process of like working through the requirements of the position and the kind of qualities you want in that person, and then having to be accountable to actually writing them, that makes your small team, in our case, maybe it's a group of managers or a small team within a department, understand so that they'll understand who they're looking for, and they'll know that person when they find that person. So I'll give you an example. In the case of an automotive salesperson, we know that conscientiousness is a huge part of that position. And for a lot of reasons, but not the least of which is that everybody has that story of the salesperson that got in the way of you buying something. And they got in the way because they wouldn't return your phone call, or they wouldn't look up the piece of information that you needed them to look up so that you could buy the product from them. You were ready to go, and they actually interfered with you. So we identified conscientiousness as a key requirement for that position. And then we have a few questions that get at that.
I was going to say,
quality.
How do you get that out of somebody just in an interview?
So we try not to have goofy questions, but and so we don't have, like, you hear about these like trick questions that companies do that you have to work out, crazy mathematical formulas. Just we're not
like
trying to
Google or
trick
something. Yeah.
anybody. Yeah, maybe it's apocryphal. I don't even know
Yeah.
if it's true, but you hear those things. We're not trying to do that. I'll give you an example. Some of the questions we ask are, how do you keep track of your commitments? So someone will say, well, I write them down. Like a commit would mean like if you have an appointment 10 days from now, how would you keep track of that? And we ask, all right, well, if you're writing it down, can you show me what you're writing that down in? And it's not like we're asking anything really intimate or personal. We actually like put it on the desk. Let me look at it and see. And you can get an idea of how methodical they are by the quality of the record keeping they have. In most cases nowadays, I'm old enough to have been around during the pen and paper days, and now it's coming into the electronic version. But if someone can't pull up the calendar on their phone that shows their commitments and their obligations, to remind them to make sure they pay their credit card bill or all the things that we need to make sure we don't forget. If they're not doing it in their own personal life, it's very unlikely that they're gonna be able to do it for you in your workplace.
And figuring that out, how did you get to that question? Because I'm reading a book right now. I think it's like neuromarketing. It's about like the psychology of marketing and sales. And there is such a big thing in just changing the question. Like the book starts out, I'm only a few pages in the book, but the book starts out and it says, there was a homeless guy sitting on the corner. He's like begging for food. And the one guy came inside that saw him and he's like, hey, I'll give you $60 if you don't make more than $60 in the next hour. And he just changed the writing on the board. And instead of saying, I need food, it said, what would you do if you were hungry? And the homeless guy came back in and he handed him money. He said, take this $10. I made more than you thought I was going to make because of just this one little change, the same idea, but this one little change. And that to me is like the hardest thing to wrap my head around, because like that question right there that you're asking people that are coming into sales, how did you get there? Because that's
besides like having someone that you hired and then learned that didn't work out.
Yes.
Like avoiding the mistake of a wrong hire or keeping someone for too long. What do you do? Because there's always that route.
This hiring system that we have cost us millions of dollars.
Okay.
And I'm not exaggerating because of all those mistakes that you're describing. Yeah. But I've got one resource for you at my website, jeffmorrill.com. We actually have the templates that we use every day in the business, those interview scripts. So if you can't figure out how to do it, now our positions are different than yours, perhaps, but there is overlap. I mean, there's some percentage of our questions that would apply to any position in the dealership. We have a different script for like an automotive salesperson than we would for a person in accounting than we would for a technician, for instance. Yeah. But there are perhaps half the questions are the same because we want all three of those positions, for instance, demand conscientiousness. So we have those conscientious questions on all of them.
And before you hired people to, the millions of dollars getting to this onboarding, how did you figure it out yourself that like, oh, wow, we need to update or figure this out? Or what were some of the mistakes that maybe we could avoid in hiring at such a small scale?
I describe a whole system in the book, so I don't want to rattle it off here and hijack the podcast. But I'll give you a couple examples. One of the things that we learned organically, and it's not like we discovered this by reading it in a book, although we've put it in a book for other people, is that it's important to have 3 interviews. So a lot of businesses rely on a single introduction to a candidate. And the problem that we found, and that's what we used to do too, is that, well, there are lots of disadvantages to a single interview. One of the disadvantages, you just don't have much time. You have your 60 minutes or whatever. If you have 2 or 3 interviews, then you can double or triple the amount of time you have, which will, give you that many more opportunities to see red flags or to communicate more about the position of the person, so you don't get that, what we call the quick departure. That person that and I can't tell you how many times it happened that we hired, and within a week or 2 or a month or 2, they quit. And the reason wasn't that they didn't like us or that they didn't see a lot of potential with us. They just didn't understand what they were getting into, and it wasn't for them. So our third interview, we call it, it's actually not an interview per se, we call it our shadow day. The third interview is we invite someone to come and spend the better part of a day actually watching the position, watching people work the position. So in the case of, let's say, an automotive salesperson, we ask them to spend 5 or 6 hours just hanging out in the center of the showroom and listening in, so that they can see exactly the kinds of things that the customers are saying to the salespeople, and the very unusual way that we work with them, so that we can create that experience that has been very that has made us famous, and that's the undealership experience. Trying to create an experience that they enjoy and doesn't have all those shenanigans involved like the typical dealership.
What percentage would you say is culture? Because I think you covered like job, logistics, and I love the shadow day. I think that's huge, and it probably filters out people that are meant or not meant to be. But is there an element of culture or just like general like personality that fits into all this? Or is that very secondary?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of directions we can go with that question. First, let me say that I see culture as like a wall with 1,000 bricks in it. And I think hiring is one of those bricks. So one way to answer the question is, on that shadow day, we actually invite everybody in the department to meet the candidate and to ask questions, whatever. And after the candidate leaves, we invite feedback from the members of the department. So if anyone has a concern on the team, they have an opportunity to voice it, and which is a nice benefit. And it's a way that we show our teams that they have a role in picking their colleagues. Like, people don't just show up one day and say, here's your new partner, or here's your new receptionist, or there's no surprise at all. It's like they've already had an opportunity to meet them and hopefully get to know them a little bit, and they get to be a part of it. So that's part of the cultural dynamic where we want everybody on the team to feel like they have a role to play and that they get to influence the circumstances of their workplace. It's not just the top-down sort of management style where we're telling them how it's going to be, and here are the people that you're going to be doing it with. That's
good. What size is your team when you do those? Or right now? Because I'm envisioning a bigger company.
Between all of our companies, we have about 120, but most of those are at the Subaru dealership is sort of like the 800-pound gorilla of our businesses, and then about 80 something right now people there.
Cool.
And as you scale, because I know there's like almost a tipping point in a sense at some point, how did it change once you started expanding and getting larger? Because I think there's like a weird spot. I don't know what it is. Is it like 30, 50 people at some point where it's like, I think
there's a lot of levels of growth. Like once you go from 5 to 10, that's huge or something. And maybe 30 is a benchmark.
Yeah. Did it change at all your process as you grew, or did you, at what point did you see the kind of like the tough point where like, oh, you know what, this isn't working anymore because the team is getting so large? Like for us right now, mostly it's me and Aaron. We have people that are freelance and working with us, and it's slowly growing, and we're noticing, little hiccups here and there, communication or, on Slack or on the whatever work we need to get done. And as we scale, my fear is, how do you fix that? Or what does that look like along the way with communication in the business and everything like that? Is there a certain way you deal with that, kind of top down, like looking like, oh yeah, these people kind of translate the information here, or how do you go about it?
As we got bigger, it actually got easier for a couple of reasons. This is some good news. It took us, I don't think I'm exaggerating, 10 years to build our original team. I mean, it wasn't like 2 or 3. I'm always astonished at these startups that you hear about that they're 18 months old and they get sold for $1 billion. I mean, it must just be that they managed to put lightning in a bottle and just hit that very special market situation where they're the only people coming into a market that had tons of potential, because it took us years and years and years, and it wasn't because we weren't trying and working hard at it. I think it's simple math that once you get, if your team, let's just pick a number and say it's 20 people,
Yeah.
and you once you get, maybe the way to think about it is like a baseball team. Once you have a really good third baseman, you can just make sure that you're providing that third baseman with the right contract, and with a little luck, you can just hang on to him. And then once you get a really good left fielder, same thing. Like, all right, we don't have to churn through left fielders, and we've got our left fielder. And over time, you build out positions and you don't lose those people. This was the problem earlier in our business, where we'd get that good person for all the million reasons that we would lose them. We didn't know how to hang on to them. The business wasn't established well enough that we had the revenue to pay them that little bit extra to keep them, all those things. So we'd get that great person and we'd lose that person. But over time, we hung on to enough of them that we got that critical mass of key team members. So we just don't have the turnover anymore. So we can focus our efforts on hanging on to the people we have instead of just endlessly cycling through new people.
That's an interesting thought too, because, at some point it's almost similar. Like we're selling a product, and for us, when we sell the product, we're always like, well, we want new customers. But lately we've been thinking about our current customers, like keeping them, retaining them. And that goes with employees as well. Once you find somebody good, you don't lose them. Like, we worked with people that we really like. We're like, we can't lose, our graphic designer, because she's great at doing her job. And that makes sense. Because then it's like one less thing to worry about moving forward and getting the company even bigger.
And there's growing pains with that. I want to dive into. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to finish. I think it's much easier to hang on to the person that's very good that you already have than to go out and find a new one. And that same thing applies to customers. And it goes back to the original comment that I opened our time together with today, how important it is that just gentle persistence, like just staying with it over time, because there really aren't any shortcuts there. There's no magic. You don't just find 5 great team members. You get them one at a time. And it's like, and for everyone, it's always 2 steps forward and one step back. You'll hire 2 and lose 1. It's just the way it is. But if you're willing to stay at it and you see the potential, I would never advise anyone to stay in something that just wasn't working. Like if it wasn't working, you don't have the vision for how it's ever going to work. Well, you need to devote your energy to something that you think will. But if you see it, and I can clearly see the enthusiasm when you're talking about your business, there's something there. And it's the kind of thing that if you just keep putting one foot in front of the other and doing the hard work, then eventually it pays off. But it does take a long time. Yeah.
And it's hard to see. It's hard to see too. Like you probably, a few years into your business, you're like, man, this is hard. Like, how are people doing this? And you're right, with like the billion-dollar companies pumping out left and right. And sometimes as a smaller business, you're looking at like, what are we doing something wrong? Like, is this the way it's supposed to be? And, we're going, it's now year 4. And I think we've grown every year. Things are looking good, but we, maybe we're not to some of our competitors, but we still think we're doing good work and doing the right things. And I think sometimes it's like, just even me saying it's like, oh, it's kind of good to hear that, not everybody starts out, and goes to $1 billion. And, it took 10 years for you to really get the business going and find that team. And I think that's important for people to hear too, because it's tough. What were you going to ask before?
Well, I was just saying, I like your different approach on hiring. And I know in your book, you talk about having a unique approach to marketing, which is kind of the forward facing, outside facing part of the business. We love marketing. We're all about that. So, and that we spend a lot of our time marketing for our company. So do you have any, learnings after growing your businesses for 10 years in the marketing front? And what are you doing differently now?
Yeah. One of the things I learned is there's a phrase in journalism called "man bites dog." And it captures the idea that the newsworthy story isn't the one where a local resident gets bitten by a dog, unless he gets really mauled, in which case they'll be on the front page, because, media tend to like there's another expression that if it bleeds, it leads. But excluding those, I got down that. Let me come back to the focus of the whole point about the man biting dog. Now, if a man bites dog, now that's a story, right? Because that's not at all what you expect. So in our particular one of our business, the car business, an example of the way we do that is everybody expects car dealers to be crooks, and there are plenty of them. I mean, we've built our whole marketing approach around differentiating ourselves from them. But the way we make the story is to do something that you don't expect a car dealer to do. And so one of the way, like we landscape with goats at our facility. We don't have mowers. We literally have goats that eat the lawns, that eat the lawn down. And it's more expensive than lawnmowers, but the marketing value of it exceeds the investment in the cost of the goats. And there are so many other ancillary benefits of having the goats around. They're cute, and the team members like it, and the customers get excited about it. I mean, there's a certain magic that happens there. And that story has been picked up. It continues over the, depending on the season when we do it, national media pick that story up. And I think to the extent that you can surprise people by playing against type or finding something that your customers are interested in that they can't find another business supplying, I think that's something that's worked really well for us.
It reminds me of the book, Purple Cow, older marketing book about just that weird one-off thing, like what's going to set you apart. Everyone has great product, everyone's blah, blah, blah.
And it's hard to come up with too.
Yeah. You can't just come up with it. It has to kind of be, how
did you come up with the goats?
So one of our salespeople said that she had heard about a golf course doing it. And she said, do you think that we could? That was it. And I thought about it. It was her idea. I mean, it came organically from the team. It wasn't mine. And I mean, I made the phone call, but from there, it just kind of took care of itself. But
that's it's kind of weird because I'm thinking about that, the story I told earlier, and just these little things that it's an idea that obviously you want to have, but it's so hard to find the right one.
Yeah. And you might have a bunch that are really bad.
Yes,
and
but that's okay.
And some don't act the way you thought.
Jeff, have you had any bad marketing experiences that you're just like, oh, this was a terrible mistake that we made doing something?
I mean, most of them, I mean, it's true. I think the way to look at it is you're putting out lightning rods, knowing that most of them will never get struck. So you make small bets. Like one of the things we do, if you're doing things that you believe in anyway, if it doesn't attract a lot of attention, you're okay with that. So one of the things we do annually, we release bobwhite quail. It's an endangered species of bird in New England. And we do, depending on the year, 250, 500 of them. And it's really cool. I mean, they'll let them out of the cages and they fly off. And to me, when we first started doing this, I was like, this is going to be a great story. Like we're going to get some, a local news crew that's going to come and blow the story. And for whatever reason, I think it's a great story. None of the media thought it was a great story, but we keep on doing it anyway because it's not like a Super Bowl ad. This isn't costing us $20 million to do it. It's a few $1,000s a year to do it. And there are other benefits too. So if it never gets picked up, we've still done something that's really, really good for the community. So to the extent that you can combine those efforts, you don't feel so bad if it doesn't work out.
I love that your company has like this underlying relationship with animals, even though you're a car dealership and you got the goats and you got the birds.
Yeah.
So we want to hear a story from Life or Business where you were called that crazy business person because you are on Call Me Crazy. I started a business. So tell us about that. Any crazy stories that you might have had where your friends and family thought you were a little off the wall?
This is my favorite part of your podcast, this question, because it's so interesting to hear what people say. But for me, maybe the thing about opening the business originally, I'd love to tell you that everybody told me I was crazy to do that, but everybody was actually very supportive. I mean, they said, well, golly, you're already, you're working in a car dealership already. And so you've acquired the skills and, you're a hard worker, and, I'm sure you'll figure it out. And if you don't, then you'll land on your feet and try something. Like there wasn't the first person that told me I was an idiot. But here's an interesting thing that I thought was the one thing, maybe the only thing in my life that people have ever said I was crazy to do. And that was 2 years ago. My wife and I picked up from Boston, where all the businesses are, and we moved back to our original growing up state of Virginia. And so I live on 200 acres in the middle of the woods outside of Charlottesville, Virginia. And people thought I had lost my mind, because they're like, well, what are you going to do? You've built your whole, you spent your whole life, you have no kids. Your wife's really independent. You've spent your whole life building these businesses, and you're leaving. Like, how are you going to do that? And what they didn't understand is that over the course of the 20 years of building the businesses, I had really burned myself out. I had probably put a little too much in, and it was just something I needed to do. Mm-hmm. And it was time to mix it up. And so the lesson that I think I learned from that, it's worked really well. And I would encourage people, even if they're not in this exact same situation in their lives, because they're younger, they don't have the financial means to do it. But the lesson is, when it comes time to do something that you really need to do, whether it's to chase a dream or it's to close down something that's not working in your life, like a business that's just not going where you want it to, or a marriage that's just never going to work, to have the courage to actually pursue that and do it. Because the danger is you get to the end of your life and you missed these key opportunities to make changes when you had the chance. Because when I look back at my life, the regrets I have are not the things I tried that didn't work out. And there are a lot of them, and some of them were really expensive. Not just financially, but I had an accident. I was involved in an accident that I was just a terrible accident that I'm still not right from. But I really don't have the regrets about that, because I lived and did what I wanted to do. The regrets I have are the things that are they were missed opportunities.
Mm-hmm.
And,
that's
yeah.
No, go ahead. No. That's great.
That's it.
That makes sense. It's like, if you don't try, you'll never know, and you don't want to regret it, and just do it. Why not? Like, you have nothing to lose. Try it out. If it goes wrong, then try something else. What are you doing on the 200 acres? Are you like building anything, trying stuff out? What are you doing out there?
I spent an embarrassing large amount of time with a chainsaw cutting down dead trees and tidying the place up, because the property had been timbered about 20 years ago, and I'm learning a lot about forestry.
I bet you are.
Yeah, more than I ever would have imagined. It turns out that timbered properties generally don't grow back very well unless they get a little love. So I'm giving it the love.
That's great. I've actually, on Airbnb, they have all these tree houses for rent. If you ever build a tree house, I'd love to come stay out on the tree house on the 200 acres. People are building these wild tree houses that you can stay at that are like little cities in trees. It's crazy. I really want.
I've seen those, and if you saw, our house is maybe just a little bigger than a tree house, but not much, and it's a lot like that, because I had the same dream. I'm the little boy, that enjoyed climbing the tree and nailing the plywood boards into the V sections of the trees is still somewhere in me. So I get it.
Yeah, it's fun, dude. Tree houses are fun. I had my grandpa built me a tree house, and it was a lot of fun. You just go up there, you don't do anything, you just like sit up there in the trees and just kind of enjoy it. Well, Jeff, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. And it's jeffmorrill.com, correct?
That's right.
And we'll put it in the show notes. Free guide there. Also, your book is out, and that is Profit Wise: How to Make Money in Business by Doing the Right Thing. That will also link in there as well. Is there anything else you want to plug? Social media, anything like that?
No, just my website has a lot of resources there for people. I listen to a lot of podcasts, and there was a time when I couldn't afford the books, earlier in my life, and that didn't mean that I wasn't interested in learning. So the website has bonus chapters that the publisher couldn't fit in the book. And I mentioned before, a lot of the tools that we use every day in our businesses are right there, and they're free. I mean, you don't need a password or anything. And I think that people might benefit, even if they're not able to read the book, they might benefit from the resources on the website.
Did you do an audiobook at all? I always love when the author reads the book.
Yes, it's coming out, but I guess the publisher, not only do I not have a face for TV, I don't have a voice for radio either.
No,
because he had he's having another person.
Oh no!
Man, you read the whole thing?
Yeah. So
I always love it just when they like throw in little extras as they're talking about it, because they're locked in there for, I don't know how long you have to read those things, but I imagine it's a very long time.
You should do the commentary.
Yeah, you should do bonus commentary.
Yeah, maybe for the second edition.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you, and best wishes with your business.
Thanks.